A country where developmental goals and achievements are measured in terms of gross national happiness, where at most concern is directed towards environmental sustainability, where the philosophy of Dharma is invoked in governance, where loyalty and love and faith in the monarch is invested to a degree that is only next to Buddha and the Rinpoches, where the air is fresh and largely unpolluted, where mountains and valleys and rivers make up most of the undulating terrain, where people live unhurried, honest lives, Bhutan had to be an inviting destination. The trip had been planned months ago as a fairly decent package deal. We were to be picked up at Bagdogra airport, and the whole itinerary thereafter would be taken care of, only minus lunch and dinner. The drive from Bagdogra to Bhutan border at Phuntsholing was tedious, with interminable traffic moving without any lane sense, causing jams at several places. Long lines of trucks went past, carrying cement and boulders. Phuntsholing was the industrial area of Bhutan, and construction material constituted a major chunk of exports to India and Bangladesh. At stretches where the roads were clear, our vehicle was zipping past. Seated in front, I noticed the needle touching 120 several times. We checked into the hotel assigned to us in the free zone area of Phuntsholing, tired after the long day and full of anticipation for what was ahead. Hongchuk greeted us at the reception the next morning, wearing the traditional knee-length robe Go and a very pleasant countenance. He would be our driver and escort for the rest of the trip. He facilitated the necessary clearances from the immigration office, and then we were off to Thimphu. The new road, which wound lower down the mountain slopes, had been inaugurated less than a year ago. It would have taken us longer to reach our destination had we gone along the older route, which was in the higher reaches. Bhutanese labourers engaged in the building of roads and other construction activities earned around Rs 700 if they were men, and around Rs 500 if they were females. Workers came from outside too, mainly India and Bangladesh. The day was clear and the sun bright and very warm. All along the way, flags of many hues fluttered in the wind. They were considered auspicious and an ubiquitous feature throughout the land. Structures that looked like bus shelters dotted the roadside at regular intervals, and women sat selling vegetables and long clusters of something white that looked like erasers. It was actually dried yak cheese, rubbery and tasteless, we found when we tried it out on the return trip. Chewing on it was time pass, Wangchuk told us. Here and there, the colors of autumn were still hanging on the trees, giving visual relief to the bare mountains and rocky ledges that hung over the road. We were slightly disappointed that the route was not as verdant as was expected, but then many of the distant mountains seemed to have ample tree cover. Our itinerary covered only the southwest part of Bhutan. We hadn't really taken a look at the map before we had started out. If we had, we would have realized that most of the forest cover extended beyond this area, covering a major part of the country. It would also have left us better prepared for the comparatively less green territory that we passed through. Lesser green as compared to the images we had installed in our mind whenever one read about how ecologically conservative the development policy of the land has been. Ongchuk drove the vehicle at a slow pace, the needle on the speedometer rarely going beyond 40. We stopped for lunch on the way. Food was very basic: rice, chapatis, dal, and vegetables, and this was to be so throughout our stay. We were told to avoid the non-vegetarian dishes on the menu, as animal slaughter was more or less banned in Bhutan, and what was available was the stuff that came from India, with the likelihood of having been stored in the freezers for a considerable amount of time. At this time of the year, at the beginning of winter, during the day, sunlight poured down through the clear blue skies, creating patches of dazzling brightness, interspersed with shadows at different turns of the road that wound its way round the mountain slopes. There were no hoardings anywhere in sight. The people we passed by were all wearing traditional clothes, the knee-length go for men and the wraparound skirts called kira for women. Even school uniforms were in the same traditional style. Did corruption exist? I asked Ongchuk. The occurrence was rare, he replied. Government officials caught taking bribes would be straightaway sacked without even a pension. Every building that we entered, even the monasteries, had the photos of the royal family decorating the walls. Clearly, the loyalty was indisputable. The king is like God to us, Ongchuk explained. Did they have anything akin to blasphemy laws? Did they have the freedom to utter anything against the king? I was curious. Who would want to? Ongchuk replied. He gives us everything that we need. I recalled an article written by Professor Thurman in the local newspaper I found at the hotel reception that very morning. He was singing praises of the constitutional monarchy of Bhutan that was built on the bedrock of the principles of transcendental individualism, non-violence, learning, and voluntary altruism. Smoking in Bhutan is banned too, and smuggling cigarettes treated a serious offense. There was no ban on alcohol though, the logic being that the former was not just injurious to the person who consumed it, but also to the others around. All farming in Bhutan stays free of chemicals. Ongchuk deplored the fact that everything that was grown in Bhutan and sent to the markets in India was completely organic, but when during the lean season they had to buy stuff from the markets in India for use in Bhutan, they got vegetables and fruits that were steeped in pesticides. After checking in at the hotel in Thimphu by evening, we took a slow stroll in the neighborhood. The architectural style of the buildings we noticed was predominantly similar. It had to be so as per the guidelines of the government. Residential houses in the rural areas rarely went beyond 2 stories, and in the cities the prescribed limit was 6 stories. There were no high-rises at all. Even being the capital city, the place was not crowded. The total population of Bhutan is just about 8 lakhs, and so the lack of hustle and bustle was not surprising. Moreover, the government was doing everything they could to discourage migration from the rural areas to the cities. There were schools and hospitals everywhere in the rural areas. Education and medical facilities were completely free. There was a land ceiling act in place which allowed individual ownership up to 25 acres only. Of course, families owning more land generally assigned ownership to individual members to retain the whole of the property between themselves. Those without any land to their name were allotted up to 4 acres by the government. Those orphaned and elderly and without any means of sustenance were given free rations and also housing. The livelihood of more than 60% of the Bhutanese population depends on agriculture. Irrigation, where necessary, is provided at very subsidized rates. Holdings are marginal by and large, and so mechanized farming is slow to take hold, although the government does provide use of tractors free of cost, Ongchuk told us. Rice and maize and potatoes are the major crops grown for domestic consumption, apples, oranges and cardamom being the cash crops. By 5:30 it had started to become dark, and we walked back to the hotel as the temperatures suddenly started dropping. Dinner washed down with lemon tea later, we snuggled inside the warmth of our quilts, winding up our first day in Thimphu. More in my next video.